Hey everyone, welcome to another OhioX virtual event. We got a great webinar conversation today. So glad you could join. It's a conversation around a reality check, AI and automation in the enterprise. Really fascinating conversation. We have a group of great technology leaders, three of which come from enterprise companies, some of the biggest name brands in the state of Ohio, leading technology projects, and really looking forward to a big and important topic and conversation. My name is Chris Berry. I'm the president and CEO of OhioX. We're a statewide nonprofit technology association, and our work hopefully helps connect, promote, and advocate for the growth of Ohio's tech sector. As part of that, we love to have conversations like this where we can learn and share knowledge, connect the dots from different parts of the state, different technology leaders with great perspective, great insights, and really just have a great conversation. And so as we have this conversation, I'll be coming off in a moment, and I won't be part of this because I'm not the expert, but I will be in the comment in the chat part. And so I'll dive in there. I'll put my name, my LinkedIn, if anyone wants to connect, and very much welcome and encourage anyone else to do the same. We hope you can hopefully meet some different folks. And of course, get to learn from a really great group of technology leaders today. And so with that, I want to turn it over to our moderator, Dan, who's the co-founder and CEO of RWX. As a true technology leader in the state, has built a couple great companies, working on his third now. And so Dan, I'm going to turn it over to you to kick off our conversation, quarterback it, and have a great chat with our guest speakers today. So thank you so much for being here, and thank you so much for leading this conversation.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Really excited to be here with you all and excited to facilitate this panel. This panel is about the reality check of AI in the enterprise, and I'm a startup founder. I'm working with a 9-person software engineering company building a new cloud computing platform. And obviously, the needs and the processes and the methodologies of leveraging AI in the enterprise are a bit different than, what I do in my day-to-day. But we have a great panel here of people that do have firsthand expertise in this. And let's just go ahead and we'll do some quick intros so that everybody knows who's here on the call, and then we'll dive in. But Sean, do you want to kick us off and introduce yourself?
Yeah, happy to, Dan. Thanks for having me. And thanks to Chris and everybody at OhioX. This is great. So I'm Sean Erikson. I work at Grange Insurance, and I've been here for about 10 years. I run enterprise architecture and emerging tech, and I'm privileged enough to be leading our AI strategy. I'm also very, very involved in the community. You may have heard of Cloud Nirvana and the Silicon Heartland Sessions podcast. So if you know about that, then awesome. If not, look us up. We'd love to have you part of the community. Thanks, Dan.
Pinak?
Hey all, my name is Pinak, VP of Engineering at McGraw Hill. If you don't know McGraw Hill, we are an edtech company. You probably use our products in school or college or in your professional education based here in Columbus. I've been with McGraw Hill for over 10 years as well. Lead our enterprise apps and AI platform.
Great. And Odd?
Hey everyone, Jucaitis with KeyBank here. Deep technology experience, 20 plus years in the biz. Currently a transformation leader within the organization. So my role really partners off with different business leaders, executives, trying to help them reimagine their operations, create new digital customer experiences, or really anything that helps accelerate our business and banking.
Awesome. Well, we're going to dive in and start chatting about AI, but I want everybody here to get the most impactful insights that you can, from this great group of experts that we have. So feel free to ask questions in the chat or with that Q&A function on the Zoom as we go. And we don't have to save the questions for the end or anything like that. But let's dive in. And the title of this session is The Reality Check. And obviously there's a lot of activity happening around AI, but I'd like to start and talk about how AI has actually been implemented and put into practice. And I know as we were, preparing for this, Pinak, you had, several great examples of things that are actually in production now.
Yeah, I can speak to some of that. So we have, I think, 2 or 3 now, but primarily in that area of building learning tools for our educators or learners. So imagine if you are reading an ebook or if you're doing an assignment or doing an activity as part of either your homework or self-study, and you're reading text that you're having a hard time understanding, you can highlight it, you can ask for it to be simplified for you, or maybe give you an analogy, or create a flashcard, or even give yourself a practice quiz. So those are some of the tools that we have. They have been in production for over a year now. And in terms of just how is it helping these learners, we are seeing an increase in at least their reading time. Causality is always difficult to establish when you have only one factor. Maybe these are students that were already wanting to read more and they're reading more now because of these tools. But it's certainly helping with engagement that we are seeing. So that's one area where we've used GenAI. The other one is, as you can imagine, we are a content and data company, and a lot of the content that we used to develop in the past was all handcrafted by our expert authors and subject matter experts. And we are doing a lot of it with GenAI as a first draft. So content that McGraw Hill creates, and we put our brand on it. We are a 130-year-old company, so we have a brand trust to maintain. We want to have a human in the loop for everything that we produce and put out there. So, but we can always have AI generate that first draft and then let the human work with the AI sort of in a co-pilot fashion to tweak it, tune it, adjust it, iron out any inaccuracies and such, and basically take that time to market and bring it way down. So both the cost and time to market then goes down. So content creation and curation. And then the last point was about tagging. So, and that may apply to many of you here. Even if you're not in that tech world, everybody has lots and lots of data. Data is not always well categorized or labeled or tagged. And in the past, without GenAI, it would have been a Herculean effort to go and find all these things and tag with everything with the same concept or topic or whatever your field requires. With AI now, we are able to, at least, again, same thing, we are able to create that first draft of the tag pretty quickly. And the accuracies there are lower than what you would see in other GenAI type of applications, but still good enough to start and SME with something. They're not starting from scratch. So content curation is another one that we are heavily using it for.
So it sounds like in everything you just shared, learning is becoming more adaptive and personalized, to an extent that wasn't really possible before. Is that right? Like I know, you mentioned a couple things around when we were talking before about people making flashcards, getting simplified explanations of things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I saw that with my own kids as well, because in the past you would just have a book or an activity or a readout or a write out, and then everybody's using the same text, the same level. That's a good example there, because we have readers at different levels within the same classroom, right? I could be reading at a second grade level, somebody else could be reading at a third grade level, but everybody's given the same assignment. Now we are able to level these things if we want to, right? Either simplify it or make it a little more complex, create endless self-study type of practice questions. You can even hone in on a topic and say, I don't want to read about this whole thing. I'm only struggling with this particular concept. So then you can say, or maybe you're a learner that prefers watching a video versus reading about it, or even doing practice quizzes. So then we can show you a video. That's the content tagging side of it that comes into play. But yes, highly personalized experiences can be now built with it, which we've always wanted to do in the past, but it was just very difficult to do because one, we didn't have a lot of this content in different modalities. And then where we had content, we did not have the proper tagging to surface these recommendations. But yes, personalization is absolutely something that we are going for and is helping these kids.
Yeah, it's really exciting. I mean, I think especially, obviously, education, makes a really meaningful and positive impact.
Yeah, one more thing I'll just add quick is for the educators or teachers. If you've been in a classroom, and I've taken my team sometimes to these classes, if you're an elementary school teacher and you're juggling 25 kids, very, very hard, right? With giving everybody the right assignment and keeping everybody engaged. Just finding some of this content is so difficult today for these instructors or teachers, because again, same thing, everybody's at a different level. Somebody's done with their assignment. How do you engage Sean because he's an overachiever? Now these tools can give you these recommendations. They know what you're doing, what these students are doing, and they know, okay, if Sean is done with it, here is a harder problem for him to solve. And everything is at your fingertips now versus before you had to go hunt it down. And our own interfaces were not good enough before, where they were struggling with it. And now it's just much more easier. It's much more intuitive because they can just talk to it, right? A lot of it is just natural language as well. Instead of clicking buttons and searching and finding and navigating, they can just ask a question to this assistant, and it brings up a nice recommendation for you.
Hey, Dan, do you mind if I ask a quick question of Pinak?
Go for it.
And set. So Pinak, and I think this is valuable just, because I think as we continue on to the conversation, there's probably going to be opportunity for us to talk a bit more generally about artificial intelligence and not just Gen AI. Obviously, Gen AI is the hot thing right now. But relative to your roadmap and so forth, and this is kind of a selfish question, to be honest with you, presumably the capabilities that you've rolled out were there in some fashion using traditional kind of technologies and so forth. What specifically was the capabilities that Gen AI specifically unlocked for you?
Yeah, so let's just stick with that example of recommendation. And we had teams that were doing AI before it was cool and widespread and pervasive. So that was more traditional predictive models and recommendation engines and all that. One of our products, Alex, they've been doing it for decades. But the content that they produce, the interfaces were still very much click, go here, find this. With Gen AI, you can now use natural language a little bit more effectively. So that's one example of just sort of weaving that in with LLMs and how that can take you from point A to point B much quicker versus traditional way of finding and navigating and all that. And the second is just creating different modality of content, which was only possible with Gen AI because we had text, but not maybe a video or maybe not an activity to go with it, or maybe not enough questions. So with Gen AI, we are just able to also produce both volume of content, many more questions. Whereas let's say you on one topic, you only had 100 practice questions, and now we can do unlimited, for instance, right? And then also different modality with new video models coming out or with just doing things like podcast and whatnot. So we're able to do a lot of different modalities to meet students where they are versus creating one thing that's just cookie cutter for the whole class.
And I would jump into, I think some novel capabilities that we're seeing emerge is like sort of contextual relevance and aggregation, right? So in kind of a traditional recommendation engine, you sort of had to know what questions to ask. You had to know what data to feed into it. You had to, tag that data. You had to create relationships with that data. I think we're seeing some emerging capabilities around large language model as an aggregation facilitator and to kind of oversimplify the outcome. We're seeing some really interesting patterns emerge around like next best action type of a recommendation, just letting the LLM detect some of the contextual relationships that historically we would have had to define. I think that's really interesting from in our scenario or in our business, like customer servicing scenarios, right? Like we have a very large commercial bank business. We have very bespoke product sets that we offer to these customers, and no two servicing scenarios are alike. And if we can enable a level of contextual awareness around a customer inquiry that previously would have had required a servicing agent to go out to a knowledge repository and try to stitch together like a disparate product set that was maybe unique to this particular customer and understand some of the compliance regulations that involve a transaction that they're trying to facilitate. If we're able to leverage like a large language model to surface all of that in like a very actionable, here's the question, here's how you react to that, that's a really, really powerful enabler.
Do you worry about hallucinations, Bud?
Oh, 1,000%. Yeah. And in large part, like our governance is almost exclusively focused on accuracy and quality control, right? Like whether it's drift management, whether it's model lifecycle management, all of those things that go into that. Our CEO, Chris Gorman, says we are in the trust business, right? And we cannot afford to get it wrong. So, I think what you're implying, Sean, is like large language models and the nature of neural networks as non-explainable is a real challenge to adoption within financial services because we cannot afford to get a wrong answer or have a model hallucinate. And when you start to think about like the value proposition of the LLM as an efficiency engine, and you start to have to pack guardrails and quality control and governance and risk management around all of that, it starts to erode that value proposition. So that's very much sort of the state of the art that we're in, is kind of like, is the juice worth the squeeze for these specific scenarios, and how do you reorient like your thinking about the business value chain when it comes to having to layer on all of these controls around it.
One thing that I found really interesting along this theme too is that I think in both your comments so far, Pinak and Odd, like these are already some things your organizations were doing that AI has really just accelerated or enhanced. Is that right? Like, I mean, you were already doing robotic process automation and machine learning, and now, it's kind of like a new approach or new similar use cases, but like new solutions that are available.
It just gives you scale also, right? Just to keep it very simple. We could do it before, some of it by hand if we wanted to, but it would take so long and be so expensive that we never even started. So some things that we've always wanted to do that we dabbled with, now we are able to do. Other things that we were doing somewhat, we are doing at scale.
Yeah, I kind of feel like some of it is accelerating investment in foundational capabilities that maybe would have gone unlooked or looked over had Gen AI not hit the scenes. Like a really good example is data governance. The thing with these large language models is that, data governance obviously is incredibly important on the one side of it, regardless of whether your data is good or not. They're still prone to hallucinations. These are still undeterministic algorithms. Well, I guess not algorithms, but models that still are prone to mistakes and so forth. But I think for me, especially when you're implementing use cases that for like associates and associate productivity and so forth, and being able to, and implementing a human in the loop cycle, you have to be able to give your associates the appropriate data to be able to check that the Gen AI is coming back with an accurate response, which I think has elevated the need for really strong data governance, because you can't, in my opinion, you can't really effectively implement human in the loop if you don't have a baseline data set that you can trust.
And I would layer onto that too, like process discipline, right? I think not only is data important, but as you pointed out, we've been doing robotic process automation for the better part of a decade, and I'm pretty proud of our maturity in that front. To us, LLM is just another tool in our tool belts that looks to enable kind of efficiency driving low value work out of the internal business value stream, and a lot of that really depends on process understanding, process discovery. Does the way that it actually happens out on the floor or in the field match what the documentation says? And frankly, we're a 200-year-old institution. A lot of times there's a lot of tribal knowledge about how work actually gets done, and in large part the work that I do in my role is really unpacking intent from truth, like the actual ground floor implementation, and making sure that the systems, the processes, the technology continues to meet the need, and if it doesn't, how can new tooling and techniques like LLM, or even like LLM wrapped in RPA, facilitate different styles of work, different paradigms, different different value chains.
Yeah, I'll maybe add a great point about process. The third sort of leg of the stool would be the people, right, on the governance side. Do we have the right governance structure? Do we have a data ethics office? Do you have a framework that somebody's shepherding, like an STI, RMF, or something like that? But just having people who know or are researching it or are staying ahead of it, because things are changing so fast on this front, that anybody in the company can go to and ask for advice and say, hey, am I doing it the right way, or is this a right compliant? And maybe for your banking industry, even more important, is this in compliance with the existing laws? Just having these people who are either specialized in it or are trained on it and are staying ahead of it, and just having the structure of communication and knowing who to go to and when also helps. Otherwise, you may have a process that works now and can break down tomorrow if you don't have the right people watching it.
So it's really kind of interesting here. We're looking at the power of using AI to, facilitate and like power these workflows, but this is within organizations that are still largely driven by people. And this is a lot of change in the way that things are done. I'd love if you could elaborate, going off Pinak, like what you just shared, a little bit more about like that change management, the organizational structure, the training. Like what do folks need to be thinking about if they're trying to structure their organizations to more effectively adopt and utilize AI?
Yeah, I can speak to what we did, and we can learn from it. And I'm sure we didn't do everything right, but early on we brought together representatives from all our functional areas. So definitely the business units, uh, engineering, legal, data science, cybersecurity, you name it. So a good collection of all the cross-functional stakeholders and senior leaders, right? The CXO types. So that you had both. You had the right domain knowledge representation on this enablement committee, if you will, and also the right level of sponsorship and authority to then drive change. So that's something we did very, very early on, and we then adopted our own sort of governance framework, largely based on the NIST AIRMF, but also other things as they were emerging, and just sort of wrote it down and said, this is our guiding principle. So things like everything that we create from a content point of view and we are going to add to our product and put our logo on it must have human in the loop. So we had our own sort of rules on top of what these other frameworks were. And then we had a forum for other people to go to what I was talking about earlier, where we made it very clear and visible that there are individuals and resources available for people to come seek guidance on. And that was the process. That's how you would sort of validate your thoughts. And we didn't, so, and we called it enablement and not like a governance, because that just is a slightly different nuance on the same time. You don't want to come across as we are controlling or governing this. We want people to experiment, but right, we want to enable people to do it in a safe and secure and ethical way. But we sort of just brought individuals together, and we still have it. So we have these different, and I don't want to use the committee to overuse it, but groups of people, right? Community of practice, if you will. And that's literally their job to drive this change forward.
And I think like when we initiate, within Key a transformation effort, we work very hard to empathize with the user community. So, I'll speak not a little bit less on the platform enablement side and more on the business adoption side. Acknowledging that people don't necessarily understand how these tools are applicable to their roles is a very, very foundational assumption that we walk into every transformation engagement with, right? We think about like LLM as it's being deployed by these consumer, targeted companies like, your open AIs. If you think about the vertical integrated softwares like a, Salesforce type of a platform or, anything that serves a particular business domain. And then you think about like what we would choose to build ourselves because maybe we have some incumbent legacy technology. If you just sort of like throw LLM into the mix without the right contextual awareness from the adopter's standpoint, I 99% chance it's not going to work because they cannot conceptualize if you're not sort of deeply understanding the technology and the art of the possible, how it's relevant to their flow as their reality presents itself in a day-to-day, business context, right? So like we think very hard about insourcing that complexity, wrapping that complexity, making it easy to consume in the context of their day-to-day business workflow and not just throw, like sort of a generalized chatbot at them and expect them to understand what the appropriate context setting in a sophisticated prompt looks like. You're going to get a lot of different results if you ask, a tool like ChatGPT or Copilot or Gemini, hey, analyze this document for me, versus a very sophisticated prompt that says, adopt this persona. Your goal is to generate a pitch deck based on, some macroeconomic conditions. Here's some reference websites. Give me an analysis based on the last 60 days of customer behavior, what a strategy might be for, liquidity management or something like that, right? Like that's a very different modality of working and interacting with the tools that we put in front of business users. And I think that's really sort of the unique and novel thing with LLM is for the first time, um, a business person can have an interactive dialogue with the tools and technology that is put in front of them to facilitate their work. And before, you always used to sort of have to adapt your work patterns to fit the way that the technology assumed that you were going to get the job done. I think LLM is really a new way of interfacing like the human experience with the technology, and being mindful of that as you're deploying that is really, really important to the overall success.
Well said.
We have a question here, and given the magnitude of change on organizations, from adopting AI, there's a question about like the board, engagement and their
Yeah.
thought process around this. Sean, I know as we were preparing for this, you had like a really thoughtful process that started with engaging with the board. Could you share
It
more with the
did.
group about that?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. Yeah, thanks for the question. Speaking for Grange, the board has been involved from the very beginning, before we even started executing on our strategy. And again, when this hit, none of us had ever used ChatGPT. And the very first thing I really did it for was something with Cloud Nirvana. I used it to create a thank you script for the team after we did our first Cloud Nirvana conference. And I tell you what, I was blown away. I was like, wow, this is game changing. And so I sat down and wrote up a strategy for how we should be thinking about implementing generative AI within the enterprise, and went to the board with it, and basically wrote up a white paper. Had some great dialogue, got their input and their support, and ever since then, I've gone back to speak with the board multiple times to share with them how our strategy has evolved, and how we're executing on it and so forth. Just had another one a couple weeks ago, and even gave them some demonstrations around how we're thinking about or how we're implementing it, to improve associate productivity and so forth, and came away from it, feeling very, very good about where we're at. So just like anything, transparency is critically important.
And there is a fair amount of risk here to manage, right?
Yeah, there is.
I kind of like some of the remarks around enablement, not governance, but probably on the flip side of things, you have to be careful about where your organization's data is going, and how people are utilizing tools that might be available. Could you share more about how you're thinking about that? Like, maybe starting with you, Sean.
You mean, so are you asking about?
Like the governance side of like,
Yeah.
you have all these capabilities, you have all these tools that you can use, but at the same time, you are trying to make sure that you're safeguarding customer data and information. As you take this one step further, how do you utilize AI to the best possible extent, but also make sure that you're having the proper policies in place and safeguarding data?
Yeah, I mean, one of the very first things that we did was we developed an AI usage policy that we had all of our associates sign, and made sure they understood that, and the approach we take is that when you go to any one of these public large language models, OpenAI, Anthropic, Gemini, you name it, and you put something in a prompt, you should think that data that's going into that prompt is going out to the internet. You don't know what it's going to be used for. So you should be really, really mindful about what you're putting into a prompt. And we put some controls and so forth in place to help us on the security side to be able to detect if what people are doing from that perspective. But governance is a lot more, and I agree with Pinak. I mean, there's a bit of a bit of magic that happens, I think, around helping folks to see that governance, while it is critically important, it really is about enabling folks and helping us to make sure that we're doing things in the right way. And sometimes, you have to slow down to go fast. And one example we talked earlier is around data governance. Another one is around, we've taken a very proactive approach to OCM with our associates, and helping them to build their skills, using LinkedIn courses, using workshops, using hackathons and promptathons and things like that to help them to understand what goes into writing good prompts and so forth, but also what your obligation is from a responsible usage perspective, and how you do things like implementing human in the loop. And then we've also rolled out like RAG solutions and so forth as well, so that we can democratize knowledge across the enterprise. I mean, we spend, and I'm just speaking, generally speaking, in the enterprise, and think about your own company, how often do you and your associates spend just looking up information and trying to get an answer from some policy or a standard or an email or a document that is sitting on a SharePoint? And when you can't find it, what do? You go ping somebody on Teams and you include them in your search. Now all of a sudden, all that productivity is just going down. And so using large language models to implement a retrieval augmented generation solution has also been a big part of our strategy as well. So
And it sounds
the
like
the other cool thing is that once you put these technologies in the hands of folks, and now you can demonstrate and give them the tools to be able to practice as well. So
it sounds like enterprise knowledge management was a pretty common use case across everybody
yeah.
here. I mean, I know, Odd, you mentioned that you have a lot of initiatives centered around that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it's not only kind of your traditional, think HR procedural type of stuff, but even like compliance policy, right? Like, I'll cite one specific example. There are a lot of regulations related to, in our consumer bank, funds availability, right? And a lot of times we restrict access to funds as a fraud mitigation tactic, right? If we're seeing a payment pattern that maybe is not typical for a customer or a particular set of accounts, we are allowed by law to hold those funds to make sure that it's not some bad actor trying to essentially steal our customers' money. So but on the other hand, like we have to make those funds available to the customer within a defined amount of time, and there's a lot of obviously complex edge cases that we have to solve for. So again, back to specific examples around complex product sets and being compliant and getting that right and making sure that we are answering questions accurately for somebody that maybe runs into one or two of these scenarios a year is a super important use case for us.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and obviously the kind of thing that you can approach very differently when you have the capability to have a model that can ingest those policies. It's been a while since I've spent time in payments, but some of those documents are not exactly short, and
500 plus pages. Yeah, that's no joke.
yeah, for sure. So given all these like different possibilities, there's a question from the audience here about like ROI of these initiatives, and I think it's probably safe to say that utilizing some of these models is not exactly inexpensive. Token costs can climb pretty rapidly, not to mention, just the time from your organizations of, the employees who are, now spending, their time trying to figure out how to leverage these technologies. How are you all thinking about the investments that you're making into building this technology, and what does that business case look like for AI? Is this experimental? Is it rigorous? Talk a little bit about how you're thinking about ROI. Pinak, do you want to start?
Sure. Yeah. It's not easy. It's not straightforward, and I'm sure every enterprise is dealing with it. What started as experiment maybe 3 years ago and wasn't costing too much, now that we have put it out there and it's being used by millions of our customers, it is adding up. The cost is adding up. A lot of these tools that we have, customers have come to expect AI capabilities as table stakes. So it's very challenging, depending on your industry, obviously, but I think it's very challenging right now for most companies to charge a premium just because there is AI capabilities in there. A lot of cost savings and a lot of ROIs are coming from those efficiency gains. And I think Sasikala said that earlier as well. That's where it's coming from, most of it. For us, a lot of content creations, me time, right? For our medical business, for example, we have physicians doing some of this, so very expensive people. So there's a lot of cost savings you can have there on just that. In terms of top line revenue growth, it's much harder to define. The one way we are thinking about it is if there was a product that you couldn't build before, or you couldn't bring it to market fast enough, and they can ask that question about time to market, that's where you can sort of justify or build a business case for increased revenue or top line growth or increased TAM or something like that. But it's a little bit harder. It's a little bit more nuanced because it's not charging more just because there is AI. I don't think that model will work in the future anyway. It's really building a product that is possible because of AI, or that is greatly made better because of AI. And then you can just charge for that product itself. So that's how we are
Well,
looking at it.
yeah. And I would say that it's part of what makes it so complex is that we're still in the process of adopting these technologies. And in my opinion, the best way to measure ROI is by measuring the outcomes that you're trying to drive. Associate productivity is it's hard to measure. We started this when we just like Odd, we had built an RPA practice years ago, and to justify that, it was all about cost savings and so forth, and it really came down to, well, for this particular process, it generally takes this amount of time for a human to execute it. Once we automate it through RPA, it takes it down to this amount. Okay, those are savings. And you can do it that way. Certainly is applicable to AI, but I think that the most effective way to think about it is, okay, within your strategy. I was going to say this earlier, that one of the things that we did early on was to make sure that our strategy was born in the business. And so we started really early on by identifying use cases within the context of the business, just to say, hey, the art of the possible, where can we leverage artificial intelligence to really make meaningful impact to the business? And there are lots of opportunities at every company to implement artificial intelligence within the context of your business processes. The trick is to know what the baseline is from an output perspective, whether it's product creation or improve customer experience and so forth. You have to have the data in place so that when you implement those artificial intelligence capabilities, you can then see where you're getting improvements. And it's hard because I don't know anybody who has AI, or whether it's just general usage of large language models versus agentic AI solutions and so forth, where you've got end-to-end automation, and you can be scientific about the way in which you're really improving ROI. The next phase, in my opinion, is how do you think about scaling your teams? A thought experiment I do, and when we talk about it at work as well, is think about tomorrow. Let's say that your revenue doubles tomorrow. If that happened, what areas at your company would be the ones you'd immediately have to go hire people? Where would you have to immediately scale? So you can take customer calls, you can fill out forms, you can whatever. Those are the areas that you should be thinking about from a scalability perspective to automate, so that the thought experiment should be, okay, if I doubled my revenue tomorrow, I'd have to maybe add 1 or 2 people, but I can scale using artificial intelligence, and that's and using agentic AI, and that is in my mind the next phase of this that we're still I don't know anybody who's doing that well.
I'd plus one that, Sean, absolutely. Like you generative AI or even artificial intelligence is not an end in and of itself, unless you're in the business of building these foundational models like an Anthropic or one of those companies, right? Like you really have to take it back to the business basics and identify what is your target outcome. Make sure you've got the right performance indicators, make sure you've got the right, organizational structure, make sure the operating model, make sure you've got the right incentives aligned to that. And really, it's just another facilitator. And your ROI calc really should be not too different from any other investment you would make in your business, whether it's a software platform investment, whether it's a capital investment. The motion of measuring success really needs to be anchored in that business outcome.
Are you all seeing these initiatives affect your hiring plans and overall job opportunities and headcount in various areas of your organizations?
That's a really good question.
Yeah, go ahead, Sean. Yeah.
I was just going to say, we've seen it effective from the perspective that when we're looking to hire new associates, we do make sure that they're well versed with AI, and that So I think from that perspective, we want to make sure that we're bringing folks in who understand what AI is, the importance of AI, aren't afraid of it, are forward leaning and so forth. I don't know if you saw the recent Stanford study where they actually took a scientific approach to how AI is affecting the workforce. And what they're saying is that, it's really having the biggest impact on entry-level jobs. And so I haven't necessarily seen that. but I don't know, I don't know that we've reached a point where it is forcing us to proactively and strategically change the way in which we are hiring. It's more about we're so busy trying to augment our processes and extend our teams using artificial intelligence that it very likely, and when I say we, I just mean us collectively, not necessarily at Grange. I think it just will naturally result in a shrinking of those opportunities. I'm a believer that it's not going to, the AI is not going to eliminate jobs or like roles, but it will enable companies to do a lot more with fewer folks. It was odd.
I would
I know
offer
you were
something
there.
similar. Oh yeah, no, you're good. I think there's a lot of thought behind that, but I would say there's no real meat on the bones of the opportunity. I think, I would characterize, especially in financial services, the last 18 to 36 months as building a mental model around what the capabilities are, which has been challenging in and of itself because of how quickly things are growing and evolving. And then, as I think Sean and Pinak spoke about earlier, like, building the right governance to make sure that we are adopting these technologies, able to keep up with the pace of change in a responsible way that doesn't put our business or our clients at risk, right? And now that, some of those cornerstones are in place, I think we're starting to see real applications come to light. And I expect within the next 18 to 36 months looking forward, that's where we're going to see, and I don't want to use the word agentic here, because I think the marketing means something really different from reality, but we're going to see true like end-to-end business value chains fundamentally shifted off of their current paradigm, where we're going to start to see accelerating impact in terms of like workforce. Because I do think that there are things that, plain old rules-based RPA, traditional machine learning, models just could not do. And LLM really is a novel capability in some of those dimensions. And I think finding the right places to apply that, we're going to see those real use cases start to emerge.
Yeah, I'll echo what Art said about the end-to-end. We have pockets of groups and efficiencies, right? So you would have a group of engineers using Copilot or Cursor heavily, and that's reducing their cycle time. Maybe you have a UX person using AI in their UX tools, but do you have everybody else? Do you have the product person also doing the same thing? And do you have this go-to-market specialist that's using it as well? What we are not there yet, but soon we will be, is that end-to-end connecting all of these dots, which is what really brings a product or a feature from conception to market. And that connection is not there, I believe, or it's not fully matured. And that's why you're not seeing end-to-end efficiency gains. You're seeing it in pocket. And that's why it's terribly hard to measure also, because just because I'm now 20% faster according to GitHub Copilot, what does that really actually even mean in terms of this product going to market? Once it all comes together, then maybe we'll see some changes, but I think it's a little bit in the future.
So Pinak, do you have, there's a question from Matt here around finding the right experts to guide this. And, you just mentioned some specific technologies like Copilot. Could you share a little bit more about what it's looked like inside your organization to, there's so many different now tools to experiment with and build expertise in. How have you, found and developed?
That's a great question. We are trying to do that. So I talked about how we had these different functional group stakeholders come together. Now we are a little bit more focused on, and I'm more focused on product development, so to speak. There's other people looking at the efficiency gain side more. But in terms of product development, bringing these product to market, customer-facing products, you have the UX role, you have the engineer, you have the product manager, go-to-market specialist. We are looking at tools in all these spheres. All the tools that you're using today have AI now. Right. And again, that governance framework that Sean and I talked about, Confluence, Jira, the tools that you may use already. It took us a while for us to get aligned with Atlassian's understanding of what data privacy is for us and what it means for them. So once you figure all that out, we are now in the process of then building these sort of center of excellence, for the lack of a better word, where you have developer advocates, you have architects who are sort of doing nothing but thinking about this. Because right now, where we are a little bit caught flat-footed is you have individuals, enthusiasts, right, who are going and doing these things where, oh, I did this over the weekend and I wrote 2,500 lines of code. but it's localized. It's not rolling out as much as we want it to be. So now we are investing in people who would make it their focus. This would be their job, to look at it deeply, and look at it not as a POC or an experiment, but how would I apply it to an actual product development lifecycle? And then how would we scale it? How would we train everybody else? Basic literacy, we are, I think, over the hump. AI literacy, I think it's time to go to that next level of AI literacy where everybody's using it in the right way, rowing in the same direction. So just having more people focused, that's my answer to Matt. Doing nothing but this, because right now people are doing it as a hobby, as a part-time job, and just having some people who are focused on it is, I think, going to take us to that next level. And really quick to answer Jason's question as well about middle school and elementary. So that's close to me as well. And OSU, we had this conference recently. Sean was there. We had Ohio State professors there, computer science chair and dean of business school, talk about this, how Ohio State wants to have every single undergrad be AI literate by 28 or 29, whenever that 4-year class is. Essential. We need to do that starting earlier than that. So college is great, but what if we could start teaching these kids how to use AI in high school, in middle school, in even elementary school? And I have young children, and that's what I'm trying to do at least, but I'm just one person. So 100% support it. We are attempting it through our products, but these are commercial products. But if there are other ways, I think this is a great thought as well.
Yeah, I have a ChatGPT license for my entire family. I got yelled at by my daughter the other day, who was concerned about how much energy utilization I was using with my extensive use of ChatGPT, and told me I needed to go out and buy some carbon credits because of my impact to the environment. But that said, I just kind of go on the question around the middle school. One other example is, last year we had bring your child to work day. And we broke everybody off into teams, and everybody had the job of building a unique story. And, we printed it for them and even created images and everything for the books and everything, so they had something to walk away with. But it was a really good opportunity for us to demonstrate for these kids the power of this technology, but also how do you make sure that you're not outsourcing the important part of the equation that you as a human have to provide, and that's your creativity. And so, anybody can sit down and go, well, write a story for me, but it takes creativity and ingenuity to help really shape a unique and new, endeavor. And so I think, when it comes to kids, especially, this is applicable to adults as well, demonstrating that and giving them the tools to be able to build those skills. If you can inspire their curiosity and their creativity, man, they'll run with it. And it was a great time.
This one, you learn by doing.
Yeah.
We think about impact to entry level workforce. The folks that come into entry level jobs, understanding the boundaries of what large language models are good at and what they're not good at are going to have a leg up on the ones that don't. And I think when you think about like what exposure to younger children mean, I think facilitated experience with a proctor who can really talk them through the critical thinking required to not only conceptualize a robust prompt, but think about the output and whether that's makes sense, whether it makes sense in the context that they're asking. Think critically about the what they're trying to accomplish via that interaction. Is going to be critical. I was privileged to participate with the Lieutenant Governor's working group, and if you haven't seen it, it's published on the State of Ohio website. But it's basically a guide for to inform Ohio's education policy. And I'm really proud that we got critical thinking skills, empathy, these core human components as guideposts to educators and administrators to help shape the policies that they adopt both at the state and the individual district level. And it just comes back to that nexus of technology and humanity is really, really, really important, and experience is something that cannot be displaced even in for younger citizens.
Yeah, and we could probably even answer that the next question on the experience front as well. How we're thinking about finding or developing the right experts to guide that adoption and spread best practices across your organization. Um, no matter what organization you're at, you're going to have some folks in your organization that you would consider to be innovators. These are the people that are the early adopters. They're not afraid to try new technologies, and recruiting them and getting them involved in shaping those guardrails can go a heck of a long way, because those are the folks that are going to use it despite what you're doing, and they can be your best advocates for helping to drive adoption.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point, Sean. And I find this kind of interesting because I think, especially on the topic of like innovation and experimentation, I think on one hand, sometimes like democratizing that works really well. You just have an organization with a whole bunch of different people that are all reading, consuming, experimenting with, different technologies and ideas. And oftentimes, like the best ones will surface up. But interestingly, I feel like this is part of what makes, startups unique is the fact that sometimes like, where you find the most value is on the ideas that are a bit more controversial or contrarian, or, the thing that the group as a whole maybe, doesn't think it's going to work, but then somebody just pushes that to a point where, they hit some sort of breakthrough. So I think obviously a lot will have to happen for, organizations to figure out the right ways to innovate like around this, but I'm really excited to see where it goes. I think, similarly, to your points around like the art and the creativity and everything, most of my own experiences with, these models for software engineering, I'm the CEO of a cloud computing platform, building a platform to run, especially build and test automation for a lot of organizations, make sure that companies who are trying to leverage agentic coding, can do that as productively as possible. And interesting there, we almost see the same concept where, oftentimes in software engineering, it's not a matter of like, can you write the code to do this? But it's like, how do you write it? How do you present this interface? How do you write it so other engineers are going to understand why that code exists and what the intent of it is? And, there's still a lot of like discernment and judgment that goes into it. And you can have models lay out pros and cons all day long, but, there's still a lot of value that comes from, I think, building opinionated things. Whereas, at least from what I've seen so far, AI kind of gravitates towards like the consensus and the median. I think we're kind of coming up towards the end of time here. If there's any last questions, from the audience, feel free to drop them in chat. But I think just to wrap up, I'd love to go through and just ask what you're all most excited about, either experimenting with or, that you're looking into or you feel like has some potential that you haven't really explored yet. Is there anything that comes to mind on that topic? Sean,
Yeah,
anything that yeah.
yeah, I think the thing that I'm most excited about is agentic AI. And I've been building some agentic solutions for the work that I do in the community. It's hard when you have a day job that is so demanding, and then it's work in the community with Cloud Nirvana and the podcast. Everything requires a lot of effort as well, and there is so much opportunity to automate a lot of the stuff that I do, like sending out emails and calendar invites and all the other kind of stuff that you do that really isn't providing me with value. And so I'm really excited about how do I extend myself and my team in the community using agentic AI. So it's an amazing technology. If you haven't tried it out, you should start getting up to speed on it quickly, because it's game changing.
Pinak, what are you most excited about?
Yeah, I'm personally most excited about some of the new latest advances in video with VO3 and Sora 2 and all that. Again, definitely we can use it in our company here, but in general as well, it's a bit scary as well. It's very exciting. It's scary. I've seen news channels where you have an anchor who is an AI. It's almost impossible to see that because they have a caption. That's how I was able to see it. So the technology is getting scary good. So I'm very excited about it. One simple application we had for something like that was to teach human psychology, and you have a group of people sitting in a restaurant talking about it, and you can just observe and learn from it. And that kind of stuff was just not possible before unless you hire actors and recreate this whole scene and do all that. And again, very expensive. But it goes back to the ROI question also, is some of these things or even teaching somebody a surgery, for example, right? Teaching a potential doctor. So it's not just about ROI, but how do we advance society in a more meaningful way, because we were not able to teach future employees or future leaders any of these skills in an effective way. It was all text-based before. So the modality is what I'm very excited about, that these newer models now provide with audio and video specifically.
Odd, anything you're really excited about?
Yeah, I have two answers to that. One sort of esoteric and one very pragmatic. I think on the pragmatic side, I'm paying a lot of attention to Anthropic's model context protocol. I think that's a really important interface abstraction that allows, large language models to interact with other, we'll call them like legacy systems. I think the power and the opportunity that Anthropic identified to, sort of build a standard space around that is really, really interesting from an agentic standpoint. More esoterically, I'm really excited about lowering the barrier to create to entry on sort of the human creative pursuit. Like, one of the things that we don't talk a lot about is like how important connectivity is to all of these technologies and techniques that we talk about. We're very privileged to live in a society and in a geography that happens to have, pretty reliable high speed connectivity. That is not universally true. And when you look at technologies like, Starlink from SpaceX, and, the democratization of reliable, high-speed connectivity and communication, combined with techniques like cloud and large language model, you're really lowering the barriers to realization of the human creative endeavor. And I think when we see that scale globally, we as a human race are really foundationally going to be transformed. I think a lot of what's going on in terms of innovation is really sort of to, pretty well developed civilizations across the world. The unlocking of human potential, I would answer, is probably what I'm most excited about.
Yeah, it's a really cool perspective. I think ties in well to Raj, your comment in the chat just about human AI collaboration. The session was focused on AI, but I think we spent half the time talking about technology and half the time talking about people. Chris, thanks for setting this up.
Well, thank you all, and thanks Dan, Sean, Pinak, Odd. That was a fantastic conversation. I love tuning in and getting to listen, and a really strong end there, Odd. So thank you very much as always, and unlocking human potential. That's a theme we're kind of touching base on in a few different ways upcoming. So that was very timely. So thanks everyone for joining. Thanks for hopping in the chat. We will also download this and post it to our YouTube channel, and then that way, if anyone else wants to revisit this and use this, or you want to share it with colleagues, you can certainly do so. But that's all from us today. Thank you so much for joining. And again, Dan, thanks for so much for quarterback and such a great conversation. We appreciate it. Have a good day, everyone.
Thanks all.
Thank you. Bye.